a lot of folks kind of struggle is they don't really know, okay, I want to go down this path, but how do I go down this path? It's scary for most organizations.
Sam, I hear that a lot, right? But I know,
Yeah.
like, I worked for a big zero harm organization.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started discovering like safety differently, safety too, I just started going in and changing the language that I was talking.
Yeah.
Rather than like talking about accidents and incidents, just call them events and then say, well, hey, what can we learn from these events?
Right.
So it was pretty. We do hear that a lot. Oh, I'd love to do safety too, but my organisation just won't support me. Just go ahead and do it yourself. Have a go at it.
That's what I found similar. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I grew up in that kind of zero harm, everything's preventable kind of cultures. And I was so burnt out, right? I was so burnt out with kind of traditional safety, for lack of a better way to put it, that I just kind of jumped in and said, okay, I'm going to start doing things differently. And if they fire me, they fire me. Right? I'm totally good with it. Because if they don't fire me, I'm going to quit if I have to continue.
Yeah, exactly.
And what was really surprising to me is that it takes a little while, but I think really to your point is that you start having those conversations and you start changing really the conversation just a little bit at a time. And for me, it was just, if I had the opportunity to speak, it's all that I talked about. I wouldn't shut up. And I mean, they were sick of hearing about HOP and safety too. They were just tired of it, because anytime that if I was tasked with, hey, will you give us a message for this meeting? Sure, I would love to, right? And it was all around that. So I think it really lends to your point that it's really just starting that conversation. And I think you talk and talk and talk, and eventually you start to impact some of those underlying assumptions that the organization holds around human error and around some of those things.
Once people start talking the same language as you, you know that you're starting to get somewhere.
Right.
Like I used to hear with some of the managers and supervisors, even now where we work just now, if I hear them talking about, yeah, what can we learn? I'm like, yeah, we're starting to get somewhere. Yeah.
That's a huge part for me. When I've seen organizations start to roll out learning teams in particular, that's one thing that's been new for most of us, at least over this way. The organizations I'm around, they're like, what's a learning team? Right. And then when you kind of start those conversations and you really point them in the direction of learning, you get them past really those really flawed assumptions around human error, because a lot of organizations I come into contact with initially, they have this assumption around human error that it's a choice, that bad people do bad things. So if you were just better, you wouldn't hurt yourself, or you wouldn't break this, you wouldn't have those problems. If you cared more, if you paid more attention, kind of the normal song and dance, right? And then once you kind of push them past that, and I really think it is that, it's the learning piece. Once their eyes kind of open to learning, they go, okay, we get that. Yep, somebody messed up. Duh, of course. Yep, of course, right? There's an error there. I'm sure there is. But how do we actually learn? Once you get them into that space to what you were just saying about, okay, where's the learning? That seems like a magical spot to get to in an organization.
Yeah, it's nice to hear it. When you do hear folk talking like what's the learning. I mean, I'm always pushing it. The guys are probably sick of me going, right, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from that? What can we do here? What is it? Is there an operational learning that we can take from this? What can we create? Whereas a lot of times you'll just go, he's just like, it was just an error. He was just an idiot. It's probably something you'd hear a lot. But thankfully, I think we're definitely changing that conversation here.
Yeah,
we're quite lucky where we are, just because of our leader, Kim, the health and safety manager. She set course for the new world, the new view, probably 2 years ago now, with our new health and safety strategy. So we were really lucky to have full support agreement from the board, from our CEO, from our executive group, that they wanted to change the way that we viewed field work and the way that we viewed human error. So we were really lucky that we sat heavily in the blame and punish world. My role previously to this space was handing out those sea of disciplinary letters, one after another.
Right.
You go 5 kilometers over the speed limit. Bad person, you're going to be punished.
Right.
So you go, yeah. So we sort of lived in this world of, we believed that was our way to improve. We want to improve, and we're going to do that through viewing you as a problem to solve. And if we punish you, then you'll learn from it and get better for it. So it was really well intended at the time, but it really did get us absolutely nowhere culturally. And the gap between what we believed went on and what actually happened grew just bigger and bigger and bigger. And it became just a chasm. It was just the size of the Grand Canyon. So it was sort of, we were in a really bad way culturally. And then, we set this new strategy aligned with safety too, and safety differently. And this is my first foray into health and safety. I've never, ever, ever dreamt of working in health and safety ever in my life, based on the fact of what I've seen over the last 20 years in my career. So I'm a HR change management guy, and it's never been of interest to me when I've looked across the fence. Not for me, but Kim sort of set this new course, and it's just unbelievable the impact that it has on the guys out there in the field. I absolutely love it. So.
Yeah, and that's what I think is amazing. You hit on a couple things that I want to kind of pull into just a little bit. You said you started this journey a few years ago. So for folks out there that think that this stuff is super fast, what would you have to tell them?
Be patient. And just be consistent. I would say, it's certainly not happening rapid pace here. It's like I was saying earlier, Sam. It's really around making sure you're talking the language. Being accessible and being available. Share as much information as you can. Share the good little learnings that we get from like podcasts like yourself. You just need to make sure that it's always there. It's always being talked around.
You got to chase your early adopters as well. Like we were quite lucky that the executive of our operational group absolutely bought right into it, and so we leveraged off him enormously. So you got to find out where they are, and you do have your detractors around the place, and they mainly, funnily enough, don't really come from the people that do the work, because the people that do the work love this approach.
Yeah, they're already doing all this stuff, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they're already doing it. They just don't know the terms for it, the names that we were giving it.
And it's actually quite difficult to move into the safety to change space, because generally speaking, you are trying to get stuff out of the way, and human nature indicates if you remove something, what's going to go in its place. So we've sort of been on the decluttering spree, which is really, really tricky at times. It's like walking through quicksand. Just a real struggle to get it through the change governance stuff.
Right. I think that that's a really interesting part, the decluttering. I think we'll definitely circle back to that one. That's an interesting part or an interesting place I think organizations find themselves in, because it's a really hard thing for most organizations. It seems like that seems to be really hard, because in safety in particular, it seems like we always want to add to, but there's like this golden rule that we can never remove, right? We can always add to stuff, but if we take stuff away, it means we don't care, right? So we can't take stuff away, even if it makes complete sense, even if it's broken, even if it doesn't work, it's there, right? It doesn't seem like it's an easy thing to do.
Bananas.
Right. So one thing that I was going to touch on too, from kind of the little bit of the earlier part of that was, I see a lot of organizations that are around the same that really they reside heavily in that blame and kind of shame, shoot and shame kind of culture, where it's very heavily focused on fixing the individual, that, we're going to extract punishment against wrongdoers that violate the golden rules of the organization. And that's how we get where we want to go, is if we fix people. In those days, but before you went down this path, what was reporting like?
Well, banana skins were popular.
No, reporting was indifferent. So I'll give you a couple examples. So we rewarded people for high numbers of hazard reporting. So we got absolute junk given back to us, and we said, yay, that's fantastic. Here's $100 gift card.
All right.
For being the highest number. Then we were low in terms of finding out about the way that work actually got done, that when people were injured. So we weren't finding out a true picture of the complexity of the work our guys were faced with. So there was a bit of, and particularly with our delivery partners as well. So there was a sort of a gap there between what was in the system versus what was actually going on.
Wow. And then as you kind of went down this path and changed, what happened with those numbers? I would assume that they probably went up dramatically, right? You probably picked up a lot more instant injury, all kinds of reporting, I would assume.
Yeah. So we saw an increase in low severity incidents, but a decrease in high severity incidents over time. But it's taken really until the last few months, so a good 18 months for the guys out in the field with the tools in their hand to actually believe and trust that the stick wasn't going to come back out.
Yeah,
right.
So we do have that trust now. It's really nice. Like they believe that we're going to do the right thing with the information now. So it takes time, but it really does.
We get invited to site now. You know, people call us and say, "Hey, come on out and come and see what we're doing." And I'll be like, "Oh, is it a risky job?" And they're like, "No, just come on out and just come and see us." Which for me is a massive win, honestly. That's taken a long time for that to happen. So I'm pretty grateful to the guys for that.
A lot of that was signalled at the start with the removal of the zero harm slogan. So we removed that with the start of our new health and safety strategy 2 years ago. And we also went on a really, really lengthy change process to remove our golden rules. So glad to say we've removed 8 of our 9 golden rules. We're just going through the last change piece around the golden rule on driving safely at the moment. So those golden rules had no substance behind them other than a sea of bullet points that we used to copy and paste into disciplinary letters. That was it.
Yeah, mostly around what you can't do rather than what you can do.
Yeah.
It's so awesome to hear that, because I still interact with organizations to this point that are still they're going down this path and they're going, okay, what we really need right now is a set of golden rules. And I'm going, no, please, no. And the obvious beef around golden rules, right, to me, and that's what I continue to share with them is, I come from organizations that have done the same. They're kind of scrapping their golden rules finally and getting away from a lot of the zero tolerance stuff, and saying, you know, if you have that magical set of rules, number one, if you've got 9 or 10 that you have to make special, you probably have too many rules. Right? I mean, it kind of back to the point of decluttering a little bit. And number 2 is, if you're going to take those 9 or 10 or 5 or whatever the organization comes up with, you know, those are the 5 things that we know can and will kill you, and it hurts the entire time it's killing you type of thing. And now we're going to create a culture of fear and silence around those things, so we can't learn. Back to the point of learning, right? And it's like, that just doesn't seem like a really good place to be blind, right? I want that person to be able to come up and say, listen, I almost died in there, and let me tell you how, right? That's a much better conversation than, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want that disciplinary letter. Right?
Yeah, totally. It still happens a lot. Thankfully not here, but definitely not. Other organisations that I've partnered with over the years. I seem to remember a couple of years ago, I worked in the labour hire industry, Sam, so that's like the sort of on-call workers. They get called in and sort of they do like a couple of shifts or whatever. And I always remember one guy, he walked under a suspended load and they were going to sack him. And I was like, oh, like, why? He's like, oh, because he walked under this, like, he shouldn't have walked under that load. And I'm like, like, did they know it was their barriers? And then right away they started going, oh,
right.
Oh no, they don't think there was. And I thought, well, how can you remove this guy from site?
Right.
If you've not got, like, there might be a golden rule in place, but you're not sort of preaching it, you know, let's put the golden controls instead.
Yeah, there you go. I love that. It's really interesting. To me, the problem is that when you take the zero tolerance approach, you're basically saying context doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how you found yourself in that situation of breaking that magical rule. That we don't care, and that just seems kind of dumb.
Yeah,
right? Because context is really important, right? To your point, kind of, where's the barriers? What actually led up to this? What was the context that surrounded this? That's way more interesting than the violation, anyways. Right?
Yeah, you're totally right, mate. Just another thing that I sort of do practically, which might help people, is, again, when I worked in labour hire, there was events happening every single day. You know, people were getting hurt every single day because we had like a couple of thousand people across multiple sites. So rather than me saying to injured workers, right, I need a statement from you. You know how you get, you feel like a cop, right?
Yeah.
I need a statement. I need a statement from you. You would get 2 lines back, or I injured my back. So I started going in and saying, like, tell me the story of the job. Let's talk about the story. And I tell you, I would capture absolute gold from that. And it's something I still do now, even here. I still go in and talk to the guys and say, tell me the story of the job. Before it happened, when it happened, and then after it happened. And there's just so much gold there.
Yeah. That's such a magical question. And it really is. I'd got the opportunity a couple months back to hang out with Todd Conklin a little bit. And that's a lot of what he was sharing with us was we were talking about reactions, right? And we were something that I kind of shared and I'll shamelessly steal and continue to share from Todd is you need to tell your leaders what they should do different around reactions, right? And even something as simple as give them a little script of how to react is not necessarily a bad idea, right? And a lot of the conversation he was having was make sure that they're asking the question of tell me the story of how. Right. And it's to your point. It's very similar, right? Tell me the story of the job. Tell me the story of how. Don't tell me that, yeah, okay, I get that. If you pull this lever and this blows up because of that all makes sense to me. That's the most boring part. Tell me of all the stuff that surrounded that, right? Yeah, of course. You put 2 trains moving at each other on the wrong track and they hit each other and there's fiery explosion. Of course, that's what's going to happen, right? Tell me the story of what surrounded that. What was the before, the during, how did we find ourselves in that position? So again, it's back to being curious about the more interesting parts, right? Trying to find the actual learning in that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. That's, once you capture the story, you might not actually, but like I had an event just recently where we couldn't work out what had happened, but when we took a dive into it and then sort of just collected some of the tales from the guys, we were actually able to go, oh, geez, you know what, that could have contributed, that could have contributed to that, that was a condition that maybe could have done this. And it sort of gave us more to work with, rather than just, I fell over.
Right.
Right. That's something, like we get that a lot.
It's the one thing we've had to sort of craft over the last couple of years is how do we curtail and condense all of the stories and learnings that we get from our learning teams. So we get a whole bunch of amazingly rich stories that we've gotten a little bit better at, but we've still got some way to go in terms of how do we make sense of this? What can the company afford to change off the back of these learnings and these stories that we find out? So the learning teams have been just, from my perspective, an incredible success. We moved away from ICAM and taproot investigations for health and safety investigations anyway. So and investigations outside of health and safety still we undertake and use taproot, but health and safety investigations, we adopted this learning team approach 2 years ago, and it has been so rewarding for the guys that do the work. Like they experience the same thing, whether we're doing a post-job review, whether we're reviewing an event, or whether we're just reviewing normal work. It is the same experience for the guy in his PPE to come in and have that chat. And that's a nice thing for them to experience that was different to what it was previously. So that's been a nice little win for us, this learning team approach.
Yeah, just like what you said, with us in the safety team, I will quite often say, like, this is the least interesting part of the event. What I want to know is, what led up to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Finding what surrounded the event at the time is so much more interesting. Organizations get so focused in on the outcome, right? The outcome seems like it's interesting. It pretends to be interesting, especially when it's big and bad and not great, right? It seems like the right place to focus. And here we do it all the time because we're still heavily driven by, is it an OSHA recordable? Is it an OSHA lost time injury?
Yeah.
That influences the level of investigation that most organizations perform on stuff here stateside. Is, okay, if it's an OSHA recordable, it's super, super bad. Even if, you bend over to pick up a sugar packet off the ground and you throw your back out, that's just as bad as any other thing that would be, that's just as bad as getting 47 sutures, right?
Yeah,
So
you're
it's,
right. Yeah.
yeah, it's so much of it is getting past what the actual outcome is, I think, right? And acknowledging the complexity of it. So we've heard so much of that, RCAs, Taproot, that kind of stuff is still a standard in a lot of organizations. And people that listen to me know that my beef with Taproot and all that kind of stuff, but we're trying to take something that's so complexity, which by definition is nonlinear, and trying to put it into something linear so we can make it very simple and easy to explain and fix one or a few small little root causes to prevent reoccurrence is what we've kind of historically said. And that's why I really love the learning team models, because we just kind of just say, hey, this stuff is complex. We'll let it take it wherever it takes us. We'll fill up the wall full of Post-it notes and really start to understand the blue line and figure out how work normally happens and learn from that. And even if we don't get to a root cause or something like that, we're fixing a lot of really cool stuff. One thing I'd be really interested in hearing from you guys is, with a lot of learning teams happening, with that kind of stuff happening, how do you retain that? How do you share that? Do you, I mean, how do you get those stories around in your organization?
So that's still a bit of a challenge for us, Sam. Like we do like operational learning, but they're created like in an A4 sheet of paper, and they're distributed at the toolbox talks and things like that.
Yeah.
I would like to try and distribute that in another way. We've sort of just started dabbling in making videos as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of thinking that's probably the next step for us. Maybe we can share it on like an internal sort of intranet, and talk about an event. So we're still having little challenges in that space, but
well, that's honestly why I ask, because I don't know, right? It seems like a lot of the organizations that I talk to had the same kind of thing, right? Where it's going, that's the part where we're all trying to figure out. So I've seen a couple organizations going down like an app-driven kind of path, and then I've seen the video route be pretty successful. I can't think who it is. It's a power utility here, I think somewhere in the Southeast. I'd seen some stuff shared with me. Where basically they were just doing like selfie cell phone videos and then basically uploading that and spreading it around. I'm like, that's cool. I like that. I like that kind of guerrilla media kind of stuff. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
Mate, I've not, like I say, Microsoft Teams. Tony will tell you about this. I've really got excited about Microsoft Teams. And what our guys are doing is they work, there's basically 10 teams here in this organization. So each team has a name, and I've noticed that the teams are actually putting themselves in a group on the Microsoft Teams suite. So I've managed to get myself onto a couple of those. So I think what I might start doing is dropping notes into that so that the lads can read it and they can see it. So if an event happens, then I can go in and drop a message around here. Have you seen this? Is this something that we need to look out for? What do you guys think about this? So that's probably another thing we look at. What I do as well is I have a look at the events for the week or the month, and I'll just basically drop a screen dump, and I'll send it to the supervisors and say, guys, here's what's happened for the month. This would be great conversations to have in the team meetings. If you've got any questions, ask me, just to get them curious to go in and have a look at them, really.
Right. Now that's super interesting, because I think that's the next step for a lot of organizations, trying to figure out how to share it. I've seen some that have gotten almost frozen in place because they're so focused on sharing it, they don't get started. And I'm like, you can figure that out later. Let's just start learning teams, and then you can figure out how to share it. So most of them that start down that path, then they're like, okay, we get what you're saying now. What I've seen quite a bit of is, it seems like when organizations start doing learning teams, they kind of catch on really quick to how amazing of a tool it is, to where they almost want to do learning teams for everything. So how do you temper that to doing learning teams around the stuff that's important, or do you encourage it to just happen around anything?
So that's exactly what happened here. Is the learning team approach was so well appreciated and liked that we had the corporate world calling us and saying, can you come and do a learning team on this IT project that we're running at the moment? Because we want to learn from that project that went really well, and help the ones that are failing at the moment. So we did. We were having we had quite a few inquiries to to bring the approach outside of the field back into the head office, which was quite nice to have that. But then it was sort of a struggle to kind of, for our capacity to be able to do that also. So we've sort of trained a few of the other people in our HR space as well to be able to, I guess, facilitate learning teams in our normal work outside of the field also. So it's been really well received. The area of opportunity still is, how do we maintain good continual improvement, change opportunities that are driven by the operations and not by us?
Yeah, post-job reviews
is
really what I've done a couple with the guys, but I just don't think that they see it as like a good learning. They've done the job, right? So they're like, oh yeah, we done it, we just got on with it. Yeah. So I try and encourage them to say, you did get on with it, but this would be a brilliant opportunity to share this with the other teams, and celebrate successful work. You've done some massive projects, let's celebrate it that you were able to do it successfully.
Right. One thing that we touched on a little bit at the beginning was we were talking around reporting going up and a little bit into the trust space or honest space. For folks that are out there listening, what would you say are some of the larger things that you guys did or would recommend folks doing in around growing an environment in which honesty is possible? Because I think that's a hard place for a lot of organizations that they find themselves in, especially as they transition from traditional safety kind of into the new view or kind of embracing the HOP principles. It's a really tough spot because, and we even touched on it, there's a lot of folklore that kind of remains in an organization after the fact. Employees rarely forgive and they never forget. We're talking about the stick. They're all kind of braced waiting for the stick to come back out or something, the not so great stuff to happen. So how do you grow that environment in which reporting is possible, honesty is possible?
So once again, it took time, but it literally was just a series of instances, errors that were made, but just examples like how we used to issue disciplinary letters for speeding fines that came in. So people knew that they were going to get a disciplinary letter. We stopped that. So people would still be speeding on the odd occasion, but that punishment was removed. We had quite a few examples with jobs where the swims weren't followed, to the T, and in the previous world, that would comfortably sit, in a first and final or even a formal written warning. So it took just lots and lots of new stories to replace the old stories, but the old stories of punishment have a lot more weight to them than a new story of no punishment. So it's taken a lot of time for the guys to generate this chat, that how they've received these learning teams. So they come in and participate in them, and they actually go out and tell their friends back out at site what it was like. So that generating of stories between field member to field member helped to reinforce the fact that, well, there's been quite a few of these now and they still haven't brought the stick out. So maybe this is an actual thing that they're sort of being truthful on. So it just took, honestly, about 18 months of continual no stick showing. And eventually, those stories started circulating about the experiences they had in being able to share their stories of complexity and a lack of resources or a really horrible shift they were on, they were fatigued, and they were able to sort of talk about things openly. So we have that trust now. Like we've absolutely repaired that, but it took a lot longer than we expected.
Also, you and myself and the other guys are really acting on site. Like we will go in and have lunch with the guys. We'll go and sit in and sit in their meetings, and we'll talk to them, and we won't talk to them about safety. We'll chat to them about anything other than safety, really.
Yeah.
And just shoot the breeze and just build those relationships. So I think that's been really important. Like I say, we're actually welcome on site now, whereas maybe historically that probably wasn't the case. you know?
Now, I think that relationship piece of it is super critical. I challenge leaders with that all the time. Their first instinct is when they walk onto a site or walk onto a location is to go boom, boom, boom right into work. And I'm like, I challenge you for the first 10 minutes at least. And when you walk onto a job site is to talk about anything other than work, anything other than work. How are the kids? What are you doing this weekend? I don't care. Talk about anything other than work. Because I think you're really onto something there. You build those relationships and people start to understand that, okay, everybody here is still just people, right? We care about each other. We care about those relationships, and it makes it a whole lot easier to have those conversations, it seems like. One thing that I was going to ask is, as you started down this path and you move from an organization that's heavy-handed or discipline-oriented, and you start to move towards kind of a more safety differently approach, how did you really work on leader reactions? Because that's a huge part of this, right? Because I'm sitting here imagining myself, I'm thinking back to past lives, right? And I'm going, okay, I can just close my eyes and remember basically directors like almost jumping up down on desks and like throwing chairs against the wall, getting mad about stuff. And it's really mad because somebody reported something basically. How do you work on that? How do you fix that? Because that can kind of sink you real fast, right?
The one thing, so we have had our moments, that's for sure. The way that you respond really does matter, and particularly from the leadership group. We've been fortunate with the one thing that I think we've done really well was 2 years ago to kick this whole thing off. Kim, the health and safety manager, designed a 4-day safety leadership program called Safe Simple, and to this day, we've trained about 280 leaders, HSRs, delivery partners, and also a lot of people now attending from outside of our organisation to come in and participate in it. So it's a beautiful program of work that really tries to get people to think about their thinking and to really challenge themselves to try and do something a little bit different. So anyone who makes the comment that I've been doing this for 20 years already needs to adjust that view and park that at the door and come in and actually think, what can I learn here and how do I try and flip this on its head to change the way that we do our work and the way that we view the people that do the work. So Safe Simple, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience for this organisation, and I really can't speak any higher of it. So I think that's been helpful to try and change leaders' views collectively around this. I think without that, we still would have had a lot more pockets of fury and blame coming out. But and we have had our moments, like we have had our field leadership roles still responding to wanting to kind of go at that person, particularly if it's someone that they're not quite connecting with as well. So once again, we've just been quite lucky that our executive in the operations space fully committed to this safety differently, safety two space, and wouldn't have a bar of signing off on any form of blame in the way that we respond. But Steve's role has been really great in working with those leaders that are on the ground, just try and coach them to be a little bit more curious. So that's also, helped in a way.
Well, and that's kind of where I go next with that, is that piece of it is that, when you have those, because you're going to have folks that react poorly sometimes, right? That's just always going to happen. You're going to have folks that react maybe not so great when something bad happens. How do you coach those folks? 'Cause I've been in those positions. I've got some of my own personal insights, but I'd be interested in hearing kind of how you coach those leaders that are at different levels. Because I'm sitting here again imagining the previous life of having a director high in an organization basically telling me that we shall fire this person. We can't. Well, you got to listen to me, right? So how do you do that?
Well, it sounds a bit cliche, but you have to display some empathy. So how do you as an individual throw yourself out there into that trench and imagine what life is like in the job that they actually do? So how do you be curious about seeking to understand the world of someone else rather than having a preconceived idea. So we sort of teach a lot about just that seeking to understand piece, curiosity. We have a lot of training around our work insights approach, which is the study of normal work and being curious, which ties in nicely to our learning team methodology. So a lot of what we do with our leaders is, how do you remove yourself from being the expert? You're not the expert anymore with this approach. The experts are the guys out there with the shovel in their hand. So how do you flip the narrative from directing to actually sort of asking? So
Yes, and really my rule, Sam, is I'll sit down with these leaders and say, right, let's build the story job. Let's get the guys in, let's talk to them and find out really what happened. Like if I see like situational awareness, the lost situational awareness, guarantee you're going to get the wrath of a Scotsman.
he gets angry.
Yeah, I get cranky with that stuff. It's just like, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, I've sent reports back actually that came back with things like that. So, mate, listen, we still need to get better in that space. There's no doubt about it. But we bring in guys like Mark Olston, you know, who can help us design good programs, make it nice and easy and simple for investigations to be done in the field. Ideally, it would be great to get to the stage where I'm not needed in that space to help them. You know, the guys are just really sort of going their own way when it comes to investigations. Right now, I'm sort of still have to be in there just having a look and just make sure there's no blamey sort of narrative there, you know. Like I do see it I still see it quite a lot now, where they say, oh, worker failed to do this, or, you know, lost situational awareness, which drives me mad.
Retraining to get him better.
Yeah. We blamed them, we trained them, and we shamed them, we blamed them, and then retrained them.
Back to work. Yeah, exactly. No, and that's still common, right? That's still something that's pretty common in organizations, because it's I mean, what does level? It's easy, right? It's easy to say, okay, they lost situational awareness or they didn't follow the procedure, and that's why this happened. So we can label them now, and we can label them usually as stupid. That's usually what we'll say, right? They're stupid. And if we can label them as stupid, that means you can't fix stupid. And that means there's nothing to fix. So we can move on, and we can give them the disciplinary letter. We can put that in their file. We can get past this thing. We can maybe do a little stand down. Everybody make sure you sign your name that we did the stand down, or go and basically do some retraining, and we're good, right? So that still exists out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, change the procedure.
But it's funny because it's and this is kind of a whole like little side story, but you mentioned situational awareness, and it's frustrating, right? How frustrating is it when you still see that situational awareness thing? I was in a meeting with a group that shall remain nameless, and I didn't realize that the cameras were on. So, you know, that story always goes somewhere really well. And somebody started going down this whole path of situational awareness, and I just started like banging my head like kind of onto the table, kind of jokingly, and they're like, "What's wrong? What's happening? Are you okay?" Like, I didn't realize they could see me, but it was the whole that thing. They were going into this whole talk about, well, if the person would have just paid more attention, this would, and like, oh.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of work around normalizing error. So the second principle of HOP being around error is normal. So we talk a lot in our in Safe Simple, and also in our movements around site, around the fact that we all make mistakes every day. And also we traditionally unfairly punish blue collar workers for mistakes than we do for white collar workers for mistakes. So it's sort of, the stick gets brought out easier for the problem children out at site. So we try and sort of say, like, I can guarantee that you as a white collar worker are breaking a whole myriad of procedures in your movements throughout every single day, because there are so many and it's impossible to know or follow them all. So we try and just sort of talk through that complexity, which drives our conversation into the decluttering space around getting paperwork out of the way, because it's making us more unsafe. The more we keep introducing more and more paperwork, it's not helping the guys out at site. So we're trying to just change that conversation around implementing more paperwork to actually removing it.
Yeah.
Well, so much of that, so much of the approach that organizations have taken for a long time around complexity is to add complication. And you're like, that doesn't seem like a very good idea, right? We take something that's very complex and then make it complicated by adding a lot of administrative burden around it. And then we say, well, okay, we're safer now because we have this, but we're usually not, right? We're usually not. So I think
And
that's
not only is it more unsafe for the people out at site, but it's actually the argument would be that it's actually you're exposed more from a legal perspective as well. The more that you add paper in, so it's just a negative on both sides of the fence.
Right. No, and I think it's interesting because you guys keep circling back to a part that's near and dear to my heart. You're talking about changing assumptions in a lot of ways, right? You're going back to this, normalizing error in an organization, really targeting the underlying assumptions around error. To me, has always been one of the first steps in trying to make this shift. It automatically starts to take you away from blame. Having those conversations around, there's error, there's rule breaks, there's rules that are bent in successful work, right? Just as much in not so successful work. And when you really paint that picture and people go, oh, and then the light bulb kind of comes on and they go, I get it now, right? And as you continue to have those conversations we were talking about earlier and really start hammering those assumptions, you start to see some amazing things happen. You can really start to embrace those hot principles. It seems like they can really almost become your new value set in your organization. And you can really start to see some amazing stuff happen. And that's what I always ask folks as I teach hot fundamentals is I ask them that. I'm like, when you look at these principles, if you really close your eyes and imagine that your organization believes these through to its core, what would really change? And the answer is everything, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely everything would change.
And not just
but
safety.
It starts with those assumptions.
Yeah, and not just safety, it wouldn't change. The whole organization would be thriving,
And that's sort of where we're headed at the moment. We're moving into the how do we change our ways, our processes in the procurement space? How do we change the way that we set up our next round of our code of conduct? How do we work with our legal and risk, IR, HR, and all those other functions that sit outside of operations? Like how do we embed this even better in those practices, particularly in the procurement space, because we have a lot of outsourced work. How do we ingrain the safety 2 thinking that we've got internally here, but we don't necessarily place inside our procuring process overly well yet?
That's an interesting part because that's the real amazing thing about the principles. Usually safety is the catalyst. That's usually where it starts. But then it just kind of explodes once the organization sees the value in all of that stuff everywhere else. And I think it's amazing that's when organizations kind of really start to go, okay, this is cool, is when their folks start coming to them and going, I did a learning team. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I did one, right? And they start kind of happening organically on their own. They're like, okay, that's great. One of my near and dear friends that I've had on a couple of times, Ian Allison, that's what he was kind of mentioning in a couple episodes back. He works in supply chain and procurement, and that's what they're starting to do. They're starting to do learning teams around this stuff. They're starting to do basically black line, blue line meetings. They're doing listening sessions and all kinds of stuff. Bring 2 meetings, right? Bring 2 solutions to a problem meetings. They're doing all kinds of cool stuff, kind of just to get into learning mode. So it's so valuable everywhere in the organization. The hot principles really, they're valuable throughout. It just becomes a value set for the organization overall, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it's super interesting. I think there's a lot of stuff to be said there. If you had to give a couple pro tips to an organization that's just starting, what would you say to them going down this path?
Ask lots of questions, be curious, and if you do get some gold, then I suppose you really need to act on it. You can't sort of hear something and say, oh, that's too hard, too difficult, we'll just park that. That would probably be my sort of advice in that space. But yeah, just do it. Just have a go. That's what we're doing, Sam. We're just having a red hot crack at this. Yeah. Sometimes we get a bit frustrated. This is a government organisation, so you can imagine there's a little bit of bureaucracy, etc. with us. But people like us, people like what we're doing, so just have a crack at it.
Yeah, it's sort of the safety world, everything in safety is important, but not everything is critical. So we try and leverage off trying to reduce the amount of noise in the safety space by only being curious about the high risk things. So we don't want the system to be clogged up. So the one thing I'd be saying is just, not everything is critical in the safety space. We don't want to hear about everything, and that's okay. We only want to know about the things that are going to kill you. So just be curious around your high risk activities and remove any blame language. Really, that's been the biggest win for us, is the removal of blame. Just that alone.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I was going to ask next is, so we kind of hit the pro tips, and I agree. That's 90% of the battle is just getting started. If you just start down the path, then you just got to have the endurance, the willingness to be patient. It seems like, because then it's this kind of multi-year process of kind of hanging on and waiting and just kind of keeping up with and just kind of tending to it, really. But for the organizations out there that are more traditional based right now, if you had to share something with them, what should they stop doing right now? What should they start doing right now? If you had any advice around that.
Well, I suppose just like what Tony said earlier there around blame, if you just eradicate that sort of word and those sort of businesses, and start using learning, I think you'll discover a lot. It's just, and building relationships with your people. I think that's a good advice for leaders. Just get in there and start being curious about their work.
Yeah. I'd say a couple of examples for that would be change the way that you're doing your leadership observations and flip it into a work insight approach, being I want to hear your voice. I want to capture your story. I'm not going to come out with a preconceived idea of what you do and mark you against that. I want to find out what you do, what's your story, and capture that as the study of normal work. And then the other thing that's been huge for us is, I'd say, get rid of your written pre-task risk assessments and move it into a guided conversation approach. Stop the checkbox madness and engage in better conversations, which is what we've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, because so many of those processes just end up not working very well. Check boxes are just look, they're safety people. We used to love check boxes, right? That was like the most amazing thing on the planet. Let's just add another box. But thankfully, most of our safety practitioners out there are waking up to understand that more paper does not equal more safe. Thank God.
There's still a few out there, that's for sure. But
so how is that for you? I mean, that's one thing I will tell you, as I kind of wander around, kind of being a little bit of a hop evangelist, most of the folks that I struggle with more than anything else is probably other safety people. How is that? How is that for you?
It's a dangerous question.
Yeah, it's a dangerous question. I suppose we won't name.
I don't hold punches, even internally with their own safety folks. I don't.
I know that. I was just like, I know from my own experiences, if I've worked beside someone who's really traditionally sort of blame tick box focused, I've sort of said to them, like, have a shot at learning some of even the fundamentals, because it will make you a better safety practitioner. Even if you don't like it, even if you start learning about it and understanding it, if you don't take to it, at least you know it and you've tried it. Open your eyes a bit to it. That's certainly something that I've seen. And you know what? If you don't like it, there is businesses who will happily take you on and if you focus on zero harm, etc. But you need to at least open your eyes to what some organisations are trying to do and what modern thinking safety professionals are trying to do.
Well, it seems like for so long, and I get it. I totally get it, because I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. We were talking about this exact subject, and that's what he was saying. He really hit the nail on the head. Was, listen, some of these safety folks have been selling this zero harm, zero this pyramid approach to safety for their entire careers, and now all of a sudden you're asking them to admit that it doesn't work that great. I'm like, I get the, I understand.
Yeah.
And look, I grew up around that stuff. We kind of touched on that,
Yeah.
you end up kind of frustrated, ready, like outside kicking rocks because you're mad about, that kind of approaches. There's pictures of me standing in front of banners that say 0 this and 0 that too. Right. But
Yeah.
you live and you learn, and then you're like, okay, and we're going to make some changes. We're going to burn that stupid banner. Right.
I know for me, Sam, like I was one of those safety guys. I absolutely was one of the, so I used to be a car mechanic. And then I sort of fell into safety as people do. And, I was one of these guys that would go, oh, no, you can't do that. I don't know how you're supposed to do it, but you can't do it like that. Right. And it was a few years ago, I was part of an investigation of a fatality where a guy had been blown up by a tire, in the mining truck. Mm-hmm. And I always remember someone saying to me, oh, if he'd only followed the procedure, he would have been alive. And as a mechanic, I could really relate to the tire fitter. It's like, well, we don't look at procedures. And so after that, it's sort of, I started listening to the Disaster Cast, which I still think is one of the best podcasts going.
Absolutely.
And Pod Conklin, I started, but the biggest change, I was given Sidney Decker's book, the Field Guide to Understanding Human Error, and this happened all about the same time, and it was really enlightening to me, and that changed my whole career.
Yeah, that's I had a similar thing. I'd been around and had to investigate a pretty significant event in an organization I was working for at the time, and it ended up in the same kind of place, right? It was, well, if they would have only, the investigation, just being part of that team, they're trying to lay out an entire list of just counterfactuals. Well, they shoulda, coulda, woulda, and if they would have just done this, and if it were me, I would have done that. Now, how could they have not seen? It's so obvious. Of course, if they would have just the normal stuff. And I remember at the time, that's when I kind of woke up to it. Very similar to that. I'm going, so you're seriously going to sit here at this table with this person that's in the hospital and going to be in the hospital for a significant amount of time, and we're going to blame them for that. We're going to blame them because they totally knew, step A, do this, step B, do that. Step C, not get to see my wife and kids and lose my leg and be in the hospital for 3 months, right? That's totally what happened, right? And so I'm going, okay, I'm done. I'm done. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see how folks kind of come around to that. And this is always a question. I usually ask this at the beginning. We kind of jumped right in. So that I love it. It's awesome though.
I'll be recorded.
Let's oh man, I forgot. No, we're so, and I like to ask people this. You started to allude to it a little bit. How did you guys find yourself in the safety space? I just think it's an interesting story because it's always such a weird, winding road for everybody, and how you find yourself doing this weird and wonky job.
Well, I sort of keep repeating myself over and over the last couple of years because this is my first ever health and safety role, but I've always felt that health and safety is a little bit, has been traditionally a little bit parked to the side of what matters to operations people. So I've always sort of looked at health and safety across the fence from other functional roles and haven't necessarily seen it adding any value to the people that do the work. So I've never, ever pictured myself working in health and safety before until I started hearing about people like Drew Ray and Sidney Decker and David Proven and Mark Alston and Tristan Casey and all these wonderful people that we've got in our hometown of Brisbane. We're very,
you guys are like the hub. You're like the hub, right? It's amazing.
It's
I'm going to have to come hang out in Brisbane. I don't know.
You need to come once the pubs open up again.
Yeah. It's Kristen's Alexa that Brad Sayre of Data Leadership right now, and I was just talking to Tristan there. These guys. It is amazing that we really do get. My first week at this organisation, Sam, I met Andy White, Dave Proven, Drew Ray, Eric Hohenagel, or Sidney Decker. The first week, I was like, oh, I'm going to like working here.
I've hit the jackpot.
I'm working on Andy right now. I'm trying to get Andy on the podcast right now.
Yeah,
I'm working on that. So this is going to be out there, and we're going to have to hound him. We're going to have to get him on. That's. Don't
worry, mate. We'll work on that for you. Yeah.
So bloody smart.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He'd offer you a lot.
Yeah. So
Andy done our training actually. Andy done our HOP training.
Yeah, he did.
really, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you kind of found yourself just kind of seeing safety kind of on the outside of everything, right? Not and the value, and then you found yourself in this space. It seems like after you kind of heard about safety differently, safety too. So
Yeah,
so you got to avoid all the other kind of
that's what
crap.
Steve keeps
It's
saying.
kind of, lucky you.
He's constantly whinging about me getting to do all the fun health and safety stuff.
Yeah.
I had to go through an apprenticeship, and Tony gets one of the cool things.
So let's hear a little bit about your journey. Steve, how did you find yourself in safety? You mentioned being a mechanic, and then kind of transitioning there.
Yeah, so obviously I'm from Glasgow in Scotland, and I came to Australia 2003.
I could have swore you were Australian.
Yeah, I know. I'm properly. I am dinky die Aussie. I do have a passport. And basically in 2006, I was actually injured in an accident at work. Well, a car fell off a hoist and landed on top of me. I think that's probably what's wrong with me. And yeah, it was just. I remember the organisation at the time said, "Look, we never want that to happen to anyone again. How would you feel about, training to do help us with safety?" And like I say, Sam, I was one of those safety sort of Nazis that would go, "Hey, you can't do this, blah blah blah." It was just like I was saying earlier, when I had that conversation with the guy, he said, "If only he'd used the procedure, he would have been alive." And that sort of really changed everything. So I started safety in about 2006 and really became interested in safety differently about 2014, after I discovered sort of disaster cast and Sydney Deckers and stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's one thing. I'd kind of had that moment that I shared with you, and then it was still a little while. I was working in commercial nuclear generation, and a lot of that space is still very traditional, original human performance kind of stuff, the kind of old InPo style of human performance type of stuff, HPI, human performance improvement, which is good, right? I don't think that they necessarily go against each other. It's just kind of the evolution, I believe, kind of where things go. That's a whole nother kind of hour or two conversation we could go into. But I had a buddy there, and I was just sharing with how frustrated I was with kind of the zero-based stuff. The company I was working for at the time had the zero banners, the zero posters, the target zero this, the get to zero that, the if you work this many man hours without this, then we're going to cook steaks, and then we're going to have pizza for every so many man hours after that, and we're going to buy you shirts, and it's going to be awesome. And then the funny story was, and I don't mean to get too far down this little story thing. I like to tell stories if you can't tell, but like the day after they had that like steak cook-off, I was mentioning they had an OSHA recordable injury, as bad as that is. But I had a friend that was working there that I'd come in and there was a book laid on my desk and a note on it and said, "I know you're frustrated. You'll probably like this." And it was Safety Differently. It was Sidney Decker's Safety Differently book. And that's what I was spending some time with Todd Conklin a while back, and that's what I shared with him. And he's like, "You started in the middle. You started in the wrong book. You need to go." I'm like, that's what started me down this path, though. Yeah. So I started by reading that book, and then discovering Conklin a little bit later on. I discovered Decker way before I discovered Todd. And then I started listening to Todd's podcast and obviously YouTube videos and kind of everything else. And now, I mean, I've just got books piled up everywhere. I don't know how I'm ever going to catch up reading a lot of this stuff.
We're sort of the same as well. We have a library of books, and it's just like, where do we start? I'm currently reading Decker's The Foundations of Safety Science, I think it is. That's part of my studies, and that's a pretty awesome book. It's that. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Yeah, and that's been a real brilliant read for me. Just like starting off where safety's come from, and then I dare say we're going to get to where it's going to go as the chapters go on.
I love this book. This has been a phenomenal book so far. I'm nowhere near through it. I mean, you can kind of see where I'm at, but that has been an excellent book, especially for somebody like me. I admit that I'm a nerd, so history of anything, I'm totally into it. So if you had to give some recommendations for folks out there that are just getting their toes, into the water with this stuff, what book would you recommend that they read?
Oh, well, books, definitely start with Todd Conklin's pre-accident investigation books. They're a lot easier to read, I feel, rather like sometimes with Decker's books, I have to read them 2 or 3 times before it sinks in. you know. But look, I suppose a bit of a plug for us is we done that documentary, the Doing Safety Differently sort of doco with Sydney Decker. It sort of talks about some of the things that we're doing. If you like to sort of watch YouTube things, yeah. But yeah, definitely.
I'll throw that out there too. That is an excellent watch. I shared that with my day job organization, and they just because they're on this same kind of journey right now. They're not quite as advanced as where you guys are at, but they're in the point of rolling out learning teams and doing learning teams and all that kind of stuff. And when they seen that video, they were like, "Oh, this is cool. This is they're like, this is awesome. We're gonna yeah." So if you have not seen that video, you should totally go check that out. I'll share the link to that in the notes for this as well, so people can go.
Yeah, it was good. It was actually it was sort of sprung on me actually. My boss Kim, she sort of said to me, "Oh, can you go out and let Sydney Decker out the building?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." It's like, "Geez, Sydney Decker's in the building." Yeah. And next thing you know, I'm up and I'm getting mic'd up, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not prepared for this." You know? It was good fun. Though. It was excellent. It was really good fun to do.
I had a similar experience with Todd, and I joke about it all the time. This will give some of the behind the scenes stuff. That he was here for a week working with that organization. And the entire week I got volunteered into driving Todd around. So it was like first thing in the morning,
nice.
picking up Todd, taking Todd, or, escorting him through the building, everywhere else we're going, driving Todd back. So it's like the whole thing. I like, of course I'll do that. Of course.
Yeah, actually, we should give Todd a shout out, shouldn't we? So, Todd, we want you to come and visit us in Brisbane.
There you go.
We're begging you.
Yeah, he's probably the only, like, we're very lucky, and we have met a lot of these.
He's the final frontier for us to meet.
You know, we know Dave, Proven, through, all the like Ted, all those guys, but it'd be cool to get him in Brisbane and hang out, have pizzas and beers.
Well, I think that's something that's amazing, though, and like I said, you guys are hoarding all the really cool people, so I'm kind of upset about that. But what's really amazing, though, is how except for Todd's here in the Southwest. I think he's in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so he's not far from us. He's still in the Southwest. I'm in Phoenix, so he's not far. But I think what's really neat about a lot of these people, especially several of them that you just mentioned, especially Dave Proven, Drew Ray, Todd Conklin, all these folks, we were just talking about Andy just a little bit ago. All these folks are really active in social media quite a bit, and they're willing to jump in and talk to you, have a conversation with you. They're not shy. And that's awesome, especially when you look at these people, and especially if you're a nerd like me, and you're really kind of digging into this stuff and you really just want to continue to learn and continue to nerd out on this stuff. They're willing to just jump in and have a conversation with you. And that's awesome, because they're the rock star of kind of what we do, right?
One more recommendation for an easy read is we've got a leading health and safety lawyer expert that we're obsessed with, a guy by the name of Michael Toomer. And he's written a whole series of really short, easy to digest legal lens over the safety 2 world against a whole heap of topics like electrical safety, plants and equipment, asbestos, a whole bunch of, there's about a dozen of them. That, because the biggest pushback you get with safety 2 type changes is that's not meeting the legislative requirements, or that's not safe, or that's not this. So using that Michael Toomer support, advice, and those books have been enormous for us.
That sounds like an amazing resource, because we get a lot of the same stuff here as with any organization to deal with. The first question that they have is, okay, has anyone looped legal into this? That's always the first question, right?
Totally.
That's non-compliance. What are you talking about? You can't. Well, I think that's an interesting place. So we can't not talk about it, right? We have to at least bring it up. I know it's kind of here at the tail end of it, but we have to at least bring it up a little bit. We find ourselves in a really weird, kind of wacky world right now, right? I mean, things are kind of strange with everything that's going on. And I think that's one really interesting part that I would categorize as really a silver lining to this whole kind of apocalypse situation that we find ourselves in, is that the organizations are realizing, they're like, hey, you know what? We do have to adapt, right? We do have to be adaptive. Hey, maybe we do have some rules that hurt more than they help. I share this example quite a bit. I was talking to an organization the other day. They said, listen, we need people to wear respiratory protection, but they're outside of their qualification period. We haven't been able to do their medical clearance. We haven't been able to do a fit test for them. Wear the respirator, put them in the respirator. It's fine, right? I get that it's not compliant, but we're in this space where we're like, okay, is that really a life-saving rule? Is that really something that's super important? So I think one of the interesting silver linings is coming out of this whole situation is that we're starting to, some of the laws and rules that maybe aren't so necessary are starting to show their face.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get it a little bit with the pushback around the legislative requirements. So we do with our decluttering projects, we do get our legal advice and recommendations from Michael Toomer in the first instance to help back up what we're doing. But we also just specifically open up the legislation, because most of the times and more often than not, it's all folklore or made up that it's meant to be part of the legislation. So we just open it up and say, well, we're happy to meet what you're saying, but just we need to see in the legislation where it says that. And that also helps to sort of remove any sort of, I guess, opposition to the change.
Yeah. So we partner a fair bit with the Queensland government, the regulator, we get them in and come and see what we're doing, come and talk to us, we invite them to our events, so.
Yeah, Steve's the biggest networking queen going around. That's the best part about him.
Well, I think that's a really valid point, because we do that quite a bit here too. Obviously in the United States, we have kind of the overarching federal program of OSHA. And then kind of under that, we have several states that have state-run programs, such as Arizona, where I reside. We have ADOSH, which is the Arizona Department of Occupational Safety and Health. And those folks are actually super interested in this new evolution of safety. Most of them are not these government bureaucrats, right? They want to come out and learn and like, this is cool. And so we can influence those folks quite a bit, it seems like, by showing them these successes. I don't see much of these folks being kind of sticks in the mud. A lot of them are like, okay, this would be cool.
Yeah.
That's Steve's motto, is to take safety 2 to the masses. He says it every day. My whole goal in life is to take safety 2 to the masses.
That's a good goal. I love it. You need to come over and spread some of that around here with OSHA. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, we'll try, mate. We'll try. Yeah, definitely. It's a good point, though. They are interested. I had one of our delivery partners, contractors, like, they really got the regulator involved with some of the changes that we're doing. So I sat in some of the meetings, and they were like, yeah, it's good, but we're so used to seeing this. I was like, yeah, but come with us, come on the journey, but it's just like what we were saying earlier, Sam, paperwork, it's just easy, right? It's just easy to see, even though people don't really use it. Well, not everyone, but, it's not really used as it should be used. These guys are interested, so it's up to people like us and you to sort of start influencing.
Well, I think they're really no different than seems to be anybody else, right? Even if they're resistant, and you kind of touched on it earlier on, which I think is interesting, kind of the use of like the general adoption curve overall, right? You're going to have kind of your early innovators, you're going to have kind of the folks in the middle, early adopters, late adopters, and my favorite word, laggards. You're going to have laggards there as well, kind of way at the end. And a lot of times we would think that some of those regulators would fall into that space, but a lot of them, once they hear this stuff, it kind of resonates with them too. And I don't know, I don't think they really care. I think they just care about what works. I think they're okay with whatever works.
Yeah, as long as we're keeping people safe, right?
Right.
It's the safe systems of work, really. I've heard a lot of people who have got massive systems. They still kill people, and then you've got these people that basically have nothing in place. But if you were to go in, you would see all this innovation and like adoption to work, what we're doing.
Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions around Safe Simple, our program around Safety 2, is the opposition to it is that they believe that we want to get rid of all paperwork and we're actually unsafe people. So we're unsafe unsafely trying to unpick everything. But all we're trying to do is use the voice of the worker to craft up the things that they actually want and need. And that would mean naturally that probably 60 or 70% of things could go. But all we want to do is rewrite things based off the voice of the worker.
Yeah, because people in the backpack, you know, that's getting that weight off your shoulder. You know, that's really what that's what we're trying to do with some of our decluttering projects. You know, some documents that I've read could be 50 pages long, you know, and it's like, you know, we're probably losing a lot of information in those 50 pages. You know, let's try and trim it back. Can we make it one page? Can we make it a video? You know, we have cartoon?
Can we remove it?
Yeah, we have a cartoon safety policy. You know, something a bit different rather than the written safety policy. We've got a cartoon. You know, we use cartoons a lot in the work that we do.
Yeah.
No, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. And when you and I first kind of connected, we had shared some of that stuff. You shared some of that with me. And I loved that. That was just so cool and just so innovative. It was so, the word that we use here that we've kind of used in our organizations have been, we call it either corporate-y or starchy. It's really starchy, right? If the kind of the old style written stuff. So to see a cartoon safety policy, I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, number one. And number two, it's totally the opposite of this normal kind of dry, boring. Because the first thing when you say safety, we can say it. The first thing that comes to mind is boring, right? That's usually the first thing.
Not here.
So to see something that's not boring, I love it. It's great.
But we
get in trouble for laughing too much in this place.
Like, I think fun is really our highest value, really, when it comes to the safety team here. Yeah. You know, like we are always laughing, we're always having fun, you know, and yeah, we are definitely not traditional safety people, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I only remember the sort of relationships that you had in the workplaces you've been at. No one remembers any of that other crap. So it's all about how well do you build and enhance other people's lives, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Now, and I thought it was really interesting as you were kind of mentioning, kind of decluttering and going from documents that are 50 and 60 pages to shrinking them down to one, or to a video, or to a cartoon, or something that's actually useful. I think that's a piece that we forget or have forgotten about procedures, especially, is that procedures are not supposed to be a hindrance. They're supposed to help you accomplish something. Right. And we've forgotten that for a long time in the safety world. I think not just the safety world, I think our organizations in general, we've seen these massive documents. Okay, we just have to make sure we have everything in it, because if we put everything in it, nothing bad can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they see it as a protection, don't they? It's like a safety comfort blanket.
Right.
Some of your documentation, but it's the exact opposite a lot of the times.
Yeah, and it's exactly it's back to that point. I share that with people all the time. Is that if you want to have really solid procedures, is number one, back to some a Conklin thing, right? Have the people that have to help you, or have the people that have to use them help you write them. That's probably rule number one. And number two, make sure that it actually helps you accomplish something, right? Again, for the longest, and I've even heard organizations have told me this. They go, no. We designed the procedures to specifically slow people down so they can think more about what they're doing. And I'm going, they're just going to naturally develop a workaround if you're trying to slow them down. Like it's human nature, right? If you're trying to slow me down, I'm going to zig over here and go around it, because I don't want to be slowed down. I'm a person. I crave efficiency. I want efficiency. Help me do something efficiently, and we can probably get it done safely too, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that we are looking at next is going to be like a freedom within a framework sort of style document. Mm-hmm. So we create the goal. This is what you're going to be doing. Around here's some of the critical controls that you need. So these are like we can't move on these. This is what you need. How you get there is up to you. You know, that's really what the plan that we would like to try and get next. You know, that's really, I mean, it's harder. It's easier said than done, to be honest. Mm-hmm. We've had a look at it, but it's definitely something that we'd like to do.
And I've heard frontline folks share the same thing with me. It's okay. Give me some framework, and the framework should be kind of rumble strips, right? Here's some rumble strips on either side of the road that tells me that I'm getting maybe too far out of where I should be. But other than that, give me a really brief set of something that says, this is how you don't die doing this task. And then let me do everything else. I'm good figuring everything else out. Just give me the 3 or 4 things that keep me alive. What are my critical controls, right? What are those things? You know, that's why I kind of love the whole sticky thing, the stuff that kills you. We'll censor it. It's the stuff that kills you, right? And so, and then asking, okay, what will kill me here? Right? What are the essential controls, and are those enough? And then other than that, let's get that settled and let me adapt. Let me figure it out. Let me innovate. You know, I'm trying to make, for me, I've always, when I first started down this path, I always said I wanted to make creativity and safety cool again, because we've kind of demonized people being adaptive or being creative when they're doing all that stuff anyways, right? And we should be going out and going, okay, how did you do that? That's really cool. You need to teach me how you did that.
Actually, Sam, that's one of the, sometimes we get, not criticized, but you have people in the organization say, you always want to make it cool. You always want to make it fancy and jazzy. Can we just have like a normal document? Like,
what would be the fun in that?
Exactly.
Well, we've been going for quite a while, guys. I appreciate you kind of coming in and hanging out. So I like to ask everybody this: any last words? Any final words, any words of wisdom that you would like to share with folks out there, with folks that other safety practitioners, other leaders, folks out there in this space, whatever, anything at all that you'd want to share as far as words of wisdom?
Just keep being curious, for me.
Yeah, just think about the way that you respond, because that really matters, and enhance people's lives, don't detract from them. So keep a good sense of humor and be patient and expect detractors, but stay calm, measured, and stay focused on your goal.
I like it. I love it. Thank you guys for coming on so much.
Thank you. We've loved it.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Yeah, good on you. If people want to reach out to us, happy for that to happen.
There you go. How can people find you?
Well, for me, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you have a look for Stephen Harvey, you'll find me standing on top of the Story Bridge in Brisbane. That's my photo. But also I've got like an Instagram account, Safety Boy, BHOY. If people want to come give me a few likes, that would be good.
Yeah, I've seen some of your posts over there. They're pretty funny. I like it. It's hilarious. Yeah,
it's just about really, again, I just want to make safety fun.
Taking the piss.
Yeah, it's just taking the mickey, and just, a lot of those photos have been taken by me as well, so if I see something quite interesting, I'll post it, and I think my tagline is, it's all about fun and learning. So yeah, please come and have a look.
I'll just jump onto my LinkedIn page as well, Tony McConachie, and we can connect from there. But I'm constantly catching up with people from around the world and in Australia, and having conversations and sharing some of the things that we're up to. So we're very happy to link up virtually or over the phone, whatever it might be. So yeah, please do.
Yeah, and people can have a look at our videos as well, Sam. We've created a few videos, and I'm not quite sure where. I think they might be on Urban
YouTube.
Urban Utilities YouTube page. So definitely check them out as well. They pack a lot of punch. They're really good.
Awesome. Yeah. So that definitely check all that out. Check you guys out on LinkedIn, all that stuff. Yeah. And then, so again, thank you so much for coming on. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll have to try to meet up in person. That would be amazing. I think I'm gonna have to come to Brisbane and try to meet all these amazing people that hang out with you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we could. If you let us know you're coming over, I'm sure we could do something.
Yeah.
We've got to wait. We've got to try to schedule it between apocalypses. We've got to wait. Sometimes this is over before the next one happens.